Right now, your feet are numb to the actual ground beneath you, and you don't even notice. Think about this. For 99% of human existence, we wore absolutely nothing on our feet. Not sandals, not moccasins, not even a scrap of bark tied with a vine. Nothing. Picture it. Dawn on a plain in East Africa. Wet grass. Bare feet pressing into cold earth, gravel, thorns. And it doesn't hurt because those feet aren't the soft pink things you're wiggling right now. They're armor. The obvious assumption is that our ancestors just hadn't invented shoes yet, that they were waiting around, suffering, for someone clever to come along. That's not what happened, not even close. Ancient humans didn't wear shoes because they couldn't make them. They didn't wear shoes because for most of our history, they didn't need them. Their bodies were the shoe. Hold on to that thought because the story of when that finally changed is one of the strangest, most recent chapters in the entire human story. So recent, in fact, that shoes are younger than agriculture, younger than dogs, younger than art painted on cave walls. We were making sculptures before we were making sandals. If that idea just gave you chills, do one thing right now. Tap subscribe because this channel exists for people who want the real science behind the body you live in every single day. Now stay with me because your foot is one of the strangest, most over-engineered machines in your entire body. 26 bones, 33 joints, more than 100 muscles, tendons, and ligaments packed into a structure smaller than a paperback book. A quarter of all the bones in your body are located below your ankles. The star of the show is the arch, that gentle curve most people never think about. It's not decorative, it's a spring. When you step down, it flattens and stores energy. When you push off, it snaps back and returns that energy to your stride. Researchers have estimated that this spring recycles a significant fraction of the energy of every single step, making walking and running dramatically more efficient than it has any right to be. No other primate has a foot like this. A chimpanzee's foot is basically a hand, grippy and flexible, great for trees, useless for a marathon. The human foot is a machine built for one thing above all else: distance. Endless, grinding, relentless distance. And it was built to do it barefoot. Daniel Lieberman, a biologist at Harvard, published a study in 2018 in the journal Nature that changed how we think about calluses. His team studied people who habitually walk barefoot and compared them to people who wear shoes constantly. The barefoot walkers had thick, hardened calluses, but here's the twist. Those calluses didn't dull their sense of touch at all. The nerves underneath could still feel the ground, still detect texture, pressure, and vibration just fine. This is not an exaggeration. A callus is a near-perfect natural shoe sole. It protects you from sharp objects and rough terrain without cutting you off from the sensory feedback your brain needs to balance and move. A modern shoe gives you the protection but throws away the feedback entirely. Your foot goes numb to the world it evolved to feel. Barefoot wasn't the compromise. Barefoot was the optimized state. And it wasn't just for walking. Humans are, for our size, some of the best long-distance runners in the entire animal kingdom. Not the fastest. A squirrel would humiliate you in a sprint. But over distance, over hours, in heat, across open ground, there's almost nothing that can outlast us. There's a real documented hunting strategy called persistence hunting, where a human simply keeps a faster animal moving through the midday heat until it collapses from exhaustion. In 2010, Lieberman published another landmark study, this time looking at how people run barefoot versus in modern shoes. Barefoot runners land on the middle or front of the foot, letting the arch and calf absorb the impact like the spring they were built to be. But strap on a cushioned shoe with a padded heel, and you tend to slam down heel first instead, sending a sharp spike of force straight up your leg with every stride. No jarring collision when the body is left to protect itself the way it evolved to. We are, in a very real sense, the endurance monsters of the mammal world. Persistence hunting works because most animals can't sweat the way we can. They overheat and collapse long before we do. In other words, the way our ancestors ran barefoot for millions of years may have been gentler on their bodies than the way we run now, wrapped in technology specifically designed to protect us. History is sometimes absurd in exactly this way. This is not an exaggeration. We invented a solution to a problem our own feet had already solved. So here's the real mystery. If barefoot feet were armored, springy, and built for endless distance, why did anyone ever put on a shoe at all? Shoes don't survive in the ground. Leather rots. Plant fiber decays. So a paleoanthropologist named Trinkaus at Washington University in St. Louis asked a different question in a 2005 paper. What does wearing shoes do to your bones? Barefoot toes grip and flex constantly against the ground, which keeps them thick and strong, the same way a weightlifter's bones get denser under load. But a supportive shoe takes over that job. Your toes relax. They stop having to grip and drive the way they used to. And over generations, the toe bones get thinner, more delicate, more gracile, to use the technical term. Trinkaus compared the thickness of leg bones, which stayed strong from all the walking, to the thickness of the smaller toe bones across a huge span of time and found a clear pattern. In the oldest specimens, the toe bones were thick and strong. But at a certain point, something shifts. The leg bones stay powerful. These people were still walking enormous distances, but the little toe bones start getting suspiciously slender. The date he arrived at, somewhere around 40,000 years ago. Anatomically modern humans had already existed for over 100,000 years by that point, already painting, carving, burying their dead with ornaments. For most of that time, according to the bones, the feet were bare. The bones can tell you roughly when, but not what the object actually looked like. For that, you need places strange enough to preserve the unpreservable, bone dry, or frozen, or sealed away from the air. In 1938, in Fort Rock Cave in Oregon, archaeologist Luther Cressman uncovered dozens of sandals woven from sagebrush bark, beautifully made, twisted and plaited, clearly the product of skilled hands. Radiocarbon dating came back at roughly 9 to 10,000 years old. A dry desert cave, sealed under volcanic ash from an ancient eruption, had preserved plant fiber that anywhere else would have crumbled to nothing within a generation. And these weren't crude first attempts. They were refined, practiced designs, which tells you the tradition behind them was almost certainly much, much older. We're just seeing the oldest examples lucky enough to survive. The oldest surviving leather shoe on Earth comes from a cave called Arini One in the mountains of Armenia. In 2008, a team led by archaeologist Ron Pinhasi found something extraordinary sitting in a shallow pit stuffed with grass. A single shoe, a right foot, roughly a modern size 7, made from one piece of cowhide cut to the shape of the wearer's own foot, laced up with a leather cord. When it was dated, published in the journal PLOS One in 2010, the number came back around 5,500 years old, older than Stonehenge, older than the Great Pyramid. A shoe, complete with the grass someone had packed inside it, possibly for insulation, possibly to keep its shape, waiting in that cave for 5,000 years. And then there's Ötzi the Iceman, the astonishingly preserved body of a man who died in the Alps around 3,200 BC and was frozen into a glacier for over 5,000 years before hikers found him in 1991. Ötzi was wearing real, sophisticated cold-weather shoes, bare skin for the soles, deer hide for the upper, a netting of bark string to hold it all together, and soft grass packed inside for warmth, like a Stone Age sock. These were not desperate scraps tied to a foot. These were engineered mountain boots, made by someone who understood exactly what they were doing for a landscape that would kill a barefoot traveler in hours. Look at where every one of these shoes comes from: a frozen alpine glacier, a high mountain cave in Armenia, a sealed desert cave in Oregon. These aren't the warm African plains where the human foot was forged. These are the edges of the world, places humans migrated into much later, places our barefoot bodies were never designed for. For most of our history, we lived in the environment our feet evolved for: warm ground, forgiving terrain, skin and callus and arch, all working exactly as intended. We didn't need shoes for the same reason a fish doesn't need a raincoat. But then we left. We walked out of the tropics and into places our ancestors were never built for. Snow that would give a barefoot traveler frostbite in minutes, jagged glacial rock, deserts that scorched the soul by noon and froze it by night. And suddenly, for the first time, the beautiful barefoot machine met terrain it couldn't handle on its own. We didn't invent the shoe because our feet failed us. We invented the shoe because we were ambitious enough to go somewhere our feet had never been. Remember what I asked you to hold on to earlier? Let's finally talk about it. The shoe isn't the beginning of foot technology, it's the beginning of human trespass. The moment we decided the whole planet was ours, including the parts actively trying to kill us. And that reframes something about you, right now. How much of your own body has been quietly numbed by a convenience you never consciously chose, traded away without ever being told what you were giving up? This is not an exaggeration. Somewhere underneath the sole of a running shoe designed by an engineer in Portland, your foot is still the same barefoot machine it always was, still capable of feeling every texture, every vibration, every warning the ground has to offer. It's just been quietly switched off. You are not broken, you are not weak, you are just ancient. But here's something worth sitting with before you go. Everything we've covered today, the bones, the calluses, the leather shoe in that Armenian cave, all of it tops out at a few tens of thousands of years at most. But actual footprints, pressed into mud and volcanic ash and turned to stone, go back millions of years further. And when you start reading the oldest footprints on Earth, looking for any trace of anything ever wrapped around a foot, you find a trail so ancient and so unexpected that it might rewrite the entire question of when this story actually began. That's a story for next time. Comment below. When's the last time you actually felt the ground under your feet? Like this video if it changed how you think about your own shoes, and subscribe so you don't miss where those ancient footprints lead.